right, YouTube is a go. And there is Facebook. It is there. Happy Wednesday, everybody. You know what? I forgot to mention last Wednesday. It was Cinco de Mayo. How could I
It
forget that?
was. It was Cinco de Mayo. I don't know.
And I always, anytime I think of that holiday, I think of everybody does the meme of the mayo and the sink in their kitchen. You know, Cinco de Mayo. You know, we've all seen it
Cheesy.
a million times. Yeah, it's so cheesy now. But welcome in. We're at May 12th, cruising right along here in the month. Getting a little chilly though. I don't like this one bit. I would like it to be just a little bit warmer, and I really hope that this is our last frost that we're going to have to deal with this morning too. I think we're getting into the month of May at least deep enough that we're not going to have to worry about this anymore. At least I hope. I hope that we don't have to. We'll look at that forecast discussion too coming up in a second. But this is day 26. We're talking about long-range forecasting. If you saw News 8 at 11, I tried the little experiment in my backyard of trying to land the ball in the ring that was quite a distance away. I almost had it. It was so close. And I was hoping I wasn't going to make it because it would totally defeat the purpose of what I set it up for. But it came awfully close.
Which I think it made it better. It's like, oh, he was close, but no cigar.
But no cigar, yes. And the whole time, Cooper is looking at me very angrily because I'm throwing and tossing his toys around, and he's not even out there to get it. And I didn't want to do that specifically because I figured he would take advantage of that opportunity, knowing I could not leave that spot being on camera, and he would run all over the place and probably run across the street and 2 blocks over and who knows what. So,
Oh, Cooper.
yes, he is full of energy. But that's what we're talking about today. We've got long-range forecasting. So welcome aboard. A reminder, we do this nearly every Wednesday as long as the schedule works out with us. And you can find all of our previous lessons at WQAD.com. All you got to do is hit the little weather tab, and then you'll see a StormTrack 8 University link right underneath that gray tab that expands on down. So let's go ahead and let's get started. We'll do the weather discussion first. And I'm going to turn this over to Morgan because she did the 11 o'clock this morning. And I haven't looked at much weather lately, so she's got a little bit more knowledge about it compared to me this afternoon.
Yeah, it was absolutely frosty this morning. I slept with my windows cracked. I was freezing still this morning. So definitely a chilly morning, but we are rebounding nicely again with the sun. Fair weather. We have a high pressure actually over us right now that's keeping the rain away, but we do have some of those popcorn clouds, it looks like, forming around our hometowns. Again, we are all rebounding quite nicely, but still not where we should be this time of year. We're still just slightly below normal, but really can't complain about today. It's going to be a very nice spring day, really. Temperatures in the mid 60s. We have lots of dry skies, lots of sunshine, low humidity, winds won't be pesky, so really just can't complain about today and the nice spring temperatures. It'll be nice to keep the windows open all day as well. And then we will continue with the sunshine and the quiet weather for the next couple of days. And then once we get into this weekend, we'll start to see a little bit of a hint to that pattern change that we were talking. Finally get temperatures back to around 70 degrees, which is more where we should be this time of year. But we also will bring in isolated chances of some thunderstorms starting on Saturday. And as you can look, going into next week, we're entering into a more active pattern. We're getting warmer temperatures, but with warmer temperatures, we're also introducing more opportunities to see rain and even some thunderstorms. The good news is if you're missing out on the warmth, we're heading to near 80. It looks like even a week from today. So really going to see that change come in, and obviously we're going to be keeping a very close eye on the showers and storms that we will potentially get in the next, or over the span of the next week. It really does look like it's going to be a lot more active.
Hallelujah for those 70s. In fact, I think we set a record low. Maybe it was Sunday. It was sometime over the weekend we set a record low. It might have been Saturday night into Sunday morning. I think we got down to 32 degrees. It was chilly. So it'll be interesting to see once we get through this month what the average temperature ends up being for the month. Was it well below normal, or are we going to get enough warmth back in here for the end of the month to get things to kind of even out? That's going to be the million-dollar question.
Yes, I'm also interested in that, especially with our updated climate normals now. that
Yes.
we are tracking.
And kudos to you. That article, awesome, by the way. I loved the graphics that were in there. Because if you didn't know, we do that. Is it every century, I believe? Or is it every decade?
Every decade we
Every
get an
decade.
update.
That's right.
I don't, maybe with a new century, there's a little bit more in terms
Yeah.
of like where they're comparing, but we get an update with that every decade.
Yeah, and it's a great little tidbit of information too. Just go to the website there, and you can just search for, probably just put climate or climate normals in the search bar there, and you can pull up that article and see how much has changed. Surprisingly, this one really caught my attention. The snowfall jumped up.
The snowfall very impressively jumped up, but what's crazy is I feel like our snow has like shifted. Like I just remember growing up and it was normal to have a white Christmas, and now it is not normal to have a white Christmas or get a lot of snow in December period. But now we're seeing snow drag into March more.
Yeah, you're totally right because it seems like we've gone through so many Decembers, and especially like right around Christmas time, where we haven't had any snow on the ground, or we haven't even had snow period yet for the winter season. It keeps feeling like fall keeps invading the winter start anyway. That fall just keeps expanding, and winter just keeps getting shoved further down.
Yep. Yep. So it's very interesting to see. That's for sure.
Yeah, we'll have to dig into that a little bit more. It'll be interesting to see too if we can see what our average first snowfall date, if that's been shifting over the years too. I think that's going to take a little bit more homework to go back into the archive to see that, but that'll be something to see. So check that out again. Just search for climate normals at wqad.com here, and you can pull up that article. Really good stuff to read, especially when you're talking about the normals, which is something we almost mention in nearly every single forecast that we do on air. So we'll go through today's agenda for you. It's an interesting topic. It's long-range forecasting. Anytime someone puts out something about the long range, I think it gets a lot of hits online, a lot of views, because of course we want to know, well, what's going to happen at my daughter's wedding 3 months from now? Or what's going to happen if I want to have an outdoor birthday party 6 weeks from now? We get that question so much. So this will give you a little bit of an insight into why most of the time, at least in my case anyway, I reply with, it may do this, but we need to wait and see what happens. This is going to clear all of that up. So we'll go through that. There's a few things involved in it. Understanding ENSO, you also have to look at El Nino, La Nina, terms that we're very familiar with. ENSO may not be a very familiar term for many of us, which is okay. We're going to explain it. We'll go into the forecasting, of course, get you a little bit of an insider secret. And then time, as always, for your questions. If you have some now, go ahead and get them in. We'll get to them at the end.
All right. So when we're talking about when we're discussing long range forecasting, we're looking like a month to in advance, like very, very far out. And this really is driven primarily by what we call teleconnections, which is persistent and reoccurring large scale pattern of pressure and circulation differences that span over very large regions. Again, these can last for months, sometimes can last for years. They influence all types of weather, rainfall, storms, and even the jet stream, which can really control our temperature here a lot. And it usually results in rogue seasons too. So if we get a very warm winter, that can usually be pinned back to perhaps we're in a special teleconnection phase.
Yeah, and we'll really dive into this too coming up in the later portion of the segment here, because there are some really recent examples that we can use to show you how some of these teleconnections work. It does get kind of complicated, but again, we're going to keep things as simple as possible. If you look at the variability of some of this stuff, you've got anything from these variables here, from wind gusts, localized thunderstorms, and tornadoes, especially when it comes to the El Nino and the Southern Oscillation. What you're seeing on the graph here are these different indexes, and this one in particular, you're showing the Oceanic Nino Index. So anytime that index falls below the zero line there, the even line, that's when we have La Nina-like conditions. Anytime it rises above that, that's when we have El Nino-like conditions. So of course, El Nino, we're talking about the warming of the waters in a certain region of the globe. With La Nina, we're talking about the cooling of the waters in a certain region of the globe. And notice when you look at this graph too, we don't spend a whole lot of time really in the neutral phase, as opposed to what we have whether we're in a La Nina or an El Nino. If you're looking at most recent history, you see there's a bit of an El Nino coming up to the year 2020, last year, of course. And then you're seeing before then a few below normal, or what you're seeing La Nina phases there too. But one thing that really catches my eye, if you look at this graph, look at how much more intense the El Nino phases are compared to the La Nina phases. You're seeing a lot more upward spike there with those El Nino phases versus the La Nina. So that's why I think El Nino gets more press, if you will, when we're in that kind of a setup. Because notice again, it's a much more what am I looking for? Impactful. When you look at the scale here, it has more impacts compared to La Nina, and that's why I think we hear more about El Nino than we do with La Nina. It's a really cool graph to look at.
Absolutely. We definitely do hear a lot more about El Nino. And the El Nino Southern Oscillation, again, this also is including La Nina, but again, El Nino is something that like Andrew said, it's more impactful in a way. One voice in a very large choir. Again, we have many different teleconnections and phases, but this is just one that we're familiar with. It's a product of sea surface temperature differences in the central and eastern tropical Pacific Ocean. So we're looking at the Pacific Ocean, and it's crazy to think about that entire ocean, depending on whether it's warming or cooling, can really impact the weather that we see in the United States. So this is just a basic diagram showing the neutral phase and then also showing the phase of the El Nino, which again is a little bit more impactful in a way, but there's a lot more going on this diagram. We have usually, again, these are very, very large scale, stable systems. We talk about low pressures, we talk about high pressures a lot on air, but these are ones that usually are on the move, constantly moving from day to day. This is very, very stable. So usually if it's neutral, we have a high pressure over the eastern part of South America or western part of South America. And then we have a low pressure kind of over off the coast of Indonesia. Well, those will switch if we are getting a lot more warmer water at the surface of the Pacific Ocean, really as an entirety. They will switch and it will bring really wet weather to South America where they're usually dry in that neutral phase. And then it will shift that dry weather over to Indonesia, kind of near Australia as well.
Yeah, you are so right on that too. And especially, this is one particular tool, if you will, that's in our toolbox that is usually the most reliable when it comes to long-range forecasting, because as Morgan mentioned, this is not constantly changing on a daily basis. This is a long-term process that once it gets started, it's going to hang around for a while. And that kind of helps a little bit in the piece of the long-range forecast puzzle pie, if you will. So let's look at the different phases, and of course, we kind of mentioned this a little bit earlier, but if you're in the cold phase, well, you've got that really cold patch of water right along the equator there. That essentially puts you in the La Nina phase. You've got a strengthening of trade winds and cooler sea surface temperatures. So if you're in a La Nina phase there, you notice especially a really, really long stretch, or a really long tongue, if you will, of that colder water too. Notice what's happening to the north of that stretch of cold water. You've got a lot of warmth sitting in the Pacific there. That can tend to enhance some tropical activity a little bit further northward, depending on some other meteorological factors. But that's an interesting thing to look at. And then you go to the south here, or the graphic on the bottom, that's your El Nino, or your warm phase. And notice too, if you look at the colors and the amount of real estate that covers, it covers a lot more real estate at a lot greater intensity, and that matches up really well with the graph that we showed you earlier. So the El Nino typically, again, gets more press, more coverage, if you will, because of that. So that's where you have a weakening of the trade winds and much warmer sea surface temperatures in that general vicinity. And then notice to the north of the El Nino phase there, right off the coast of the western United States, you've got a patch of some colder water that's sitting there as well. So big, profound effects with both of these phases.
So taking a little bit of a closer look into what impacts we do see whenever we're in an El Nino pattern. So this is looking at the wintertime pattern. If we are in an El Nino or a positive phase of ENSO, we will see over the north central, a lot of the United States will be warm and dry because we kind of see that polar jet stream hanging off more to our north. And we will generally not see as much snow or rain during the wintertime months, but we generally here are more warm and dry. Well, the wet weather gets shifted down to the south during that El Nino pattern because they have more of that amplified StormTrack down there with the subtropical jet stream. So again, warm and dry over the north, stormy and rainy over the south.
This is the kind of pattern you want if you're not a fan of winter, because that polar jet stream, it's way up north. That's the kind of stuff that brings that single-digit high temperature crap down here. So El Nino is something that I usually pray for every single winter because I hate all the cold that comes around here. So that's a really great explanation there with that graph. I love it. Next, we've got a little video, and I think this is about El Nino.
El Nino is the warm water phase of the El Nino Southern Oscillation, the most influential climate pattern used in seasonal forecasting.
During El Nino, ocean temperatures over the Pacific begin to warm up. Surface winds weaken and rainfall increases over the central or eastern Pacific while decreasing over Indonesia. Warmer oceanic and atmospheric conditions in the central and eastern Pacific fuel the jet stream. Because the central and eastern Pacific is warmer than normal during an El Nino, the jet shifts eastward with this energy source. A stronger eastward shifted jet stream favors low pressure in the Gulf of Alaska, higher pressure over western Canada, and lower pressure over the southeastern United States. This type of influence from one region to another over large parts of the globe is referred to as a teleconnection. During winter, El Nino is generally associated with wetter than average conditions across the southern tier and drier than average conditions in the Pacific Northwest, the Northern Rockies, and the Ohio Valley. We typically observe below average temperatures across the southeastern United States and warmer than average conditions over the northern part of the country.
Weather is what we experience every day. But remember, climate predictions based on El Nino tell us what kind of weather to expect on average and over a long period of time. From NOAA's Climate Prediction Center, I'm Ned Gardner.
So a neat little video there, explaining the different types that we look at there, and it agrees too with what kind of we're showing you here. And that, yeah, you get the warmer winters with El Nino, but on the flip side of that, like what we had this winter, we had a La Nina this winter, and that certainly brought us some colder spells. Notice we're not in the cool bubble there per se, but we're right on the edge, so we're still quite vulnerable to some of those Arctic outbreaks. In fact, we're still in a little bit of a La Nina right now. It's not as strong as it was this winter, but there are signs that we may return to that here later this summer and especially into the fall. So that would make sense. We're in a little bit of a La Nina now, so it's a little cooler outside. We're a little more vulnerable to that. But here's your overall La Nina pattern. You've got the polar jet stream, which unfortunately comes awfully close to us here and goes even to the south of us, as we saw this past winter. It went all the way down to Texas and the Gulf Coast, which was insane. What a winter to be a meteorologist. That was absolutely crazy. You've got really warm weather in Florida, of course. You've also got very dry weather in the desert southwest, and then just slightly a little bit more moisture off to our east there in the Ohio Valley. The polar jet is actually driven northward near Alaska, which you can see there as high pressure moves in. So Alaska, most of the time this past winter, was actually warmer than we were for several days, and that's why you have that orientation of the jet stream pulling much farther northward in that region than normal.
Yeah, definitely a very interesting winter when it comes to that active jet stream. All right, sudden stratospheric warming. Oh boy, slows the winds of the polar vortex. Air sinks and rapidly warms. We saw it happen this past winter. You can read more about this on WQAD.com to get a little bit more of insight about stratospheric warming. Obviously, the one and only Andrew Stutzke took this on. But really, really bitterly cold during the entire month of February. And this does a good job of explaining really why we saw that polar jet stream just weaken and pull down and stick with us for a good chunk of time.
Yeah, and it's another thing that's really hard to predict. You don't get a lot of agreement when it comes to models, especially in this type of scenario. It is, in effect, kind of a long-range prediction, if you will, because it does last for a significant period of time, but it's a little more complicated. But it is one of the things that you have to consider, too, when you look at the long-range forecasting. We're going to hop in our little time machine for today, and we're going to go back to November of 1997. This was quite a year for El Nino. In fact, it was one of the more strongest ones that we've experienced in recent times here. Notice there's another one, too, from July of 2015. Not quite as strong as what we saw in 1997, but certainly, as you can see, it was very massive in magnitude, very expansive. But the November 1997 event was a really exceptional event, and we'll break it down here as to why it was. So we had a lot of extra heat energy present in that area of the globe. It was actually 93 times more than the amount of energy produced by fossil fuels in the entire United States for the year of 1995. That is a lot of energy. And when you have all that energy just sitting around, Mother Nature, as we always talked about, we need to balance things out. And how do we balance those out? Big storms, big storm systems, big natural disasters, and that's exactly what happened. With all of that energy sitting around, you got a record 11 typhoons that were observed in the Western Pacific, 10 of which reached Category 5 in strength, which is the strongest strength that you can get in terms of typhoons and hurricanes. We also had a record 17 hurricanes reach Category 4 and Category 5 in the North Pacific. So El Nino, especially all that warmth, really plays a huge role in the hurricane seasons, not in just one ocean or another, but actually in both. Really, really dramatic.
Very dramatic. And again, typhoons are the same thing as hurricanes. It just depends on the location of the earth and what they call them. It's the same thing. But other impacts, agricultural losses from drought, floods, temperature extremes, disease outbreaks from mosquitoes, malaria, rats, and other waterborne disease, and wildlife, economic, and even human life loss. So it can pose a lot of public health impacts to us as well. And we, even here in the United States, the poor Southwest has been in an extreme drought for a very long time, and they did not get much rainfall. And a lot of the areas that do see snow out there didn't get enough snowfall either to help even rebound some areas around there from the drought. So they have just been persistent, and it looks like it's going to carry on into the summer, which poses a threat for wildfires, and it's a lot for sure.
Yeah, it almost seems like their monsoon season in the desert Southwest this year was nearly non-existent. And typically you see just days upon days and days of rainfall, and sometimes that moisture will scoot its way up here too, but it really seems like that has not happened much of it all this time of year, unfortunately for them.
Yes, very unfortunate. And even in, I think, northwestern Iowa is still considered to be in a pretty severe drought still from last summer.
Yeah, I was just pulling up the drought monitor, and yeah, they've got the L on there, which on this map here stands for long-term drought, and that's what's happening. Yeah, extreme northwest Iowa, and even parts of north central Iowa have a short and long-term drought ongoing.
There really is a hole around our hometowns because our winter, we were the bullseye for multiple snow events, and that helped us.
Yeah, we were. We really were. And the other thing, too, we're noticing, storm season, we have yet to get those big complexes of showers and thunderstorms up here. Let alone, Central Illinois had plenty of them. Downstate Illinois had plenty. We've had a few, but none have migrated far enough north yet.
Nope. And we've been lucky in terms of severe weather. I think I've only heard thunder twice so far this entire season.
Yep.
So
I only got one more on you because I was in the Beast and we saw the lightning and thunder there. Otherwise, I would be on the same page with you.
Yep. Haven't gotten a good thunderstorm yet. It's fine.
It's sad. It is sad. Let's go on to the MGO, the Madden Julian Oscillation. This is something, if you follow a weather blog, somebody who's a real big weather weenie, I'm not going to name any names because I don't want to give everybody free publicity here, but there's a certain individual that talks about the MGO, or the MJO, MGO, so we're talking about growth hormones. MJO, who talks about this a lot. And it can be useful, but as we talked about earlier, this is not something that stays fairly consistent. It's changing day by day, and we're going to explain that coming up. But this occurs in the Pacific Ocean, and it's not as stable as ENSO because it's constantly moving, it's constantly evolving. And this can really throw a wrench in a long-term forecast. If you got this kind of a setup, and all of a sudden it changes from one phase to another, and that phase is not grasped upon the forecast models, this can really, really put a damper on your forecast. There was 1 month recently, was it February? Or maybe it was later last year, where the Climate Prediction Center put out an outlook saying we were going to have above average temperatures for the month. And whatever month that was, we had nothing but cold, cold, and more cold. I think it was February.
I want to say it was February too.
Yeah, it was a huge bust all around.
I was looking forward to it because I was like, oh, are we going to get out of this winter? Like, we're going to be cool from the extreme cold? No.
Yeah, so think of the MGO as sometimes it's your friend, and then sometimes it can really betray the crap out of you and really drag your name through the mud. We're going to show you why here as we go through the next couple of slides.
Yeah, so the MJO can often, and does often, occur multiple times in one season. Again, it comes in phases. The big influencer of precipitation and temperature trends here in the United States. So again, just this past February, we were in this trend of just constant cold. And then we got really warm again in March. It was like almost a 180. But then I'm sure you can also think of instances, I can't think of one off my head, where we just were stuck in a constant rain pattern. Can likely be traced back to potentially being influenced by the MJO.
Yeah, you get these different phases in the graph there at the bottom. I know it's a little hard to see, the text is anyway, but these are examples of all of the different phases going through phase 1 all the way through phase 8. There's 8 total phases that make up this pattern, if you will, that this is established. And notice, yeah, you go from dry periods to very wet periods. In the United States, same thing. You have different areas that become a little wetter than normal. Some are cooler than normal. And we're going to break this down here. We'll actually show you what phase we're in right now and how the forecast cycle is determining what phase we may come in next. So to separate these two and to show you the difference between them, with the MGO, what you want to do is you imagine this. So ENSO is one person is just riding a stationary bike in the middle of a stage all day long. Okay, they're having their own little exercise class, and it's just them and them only. They're sitting there pedaling on the stationary bike. They're not going anywhere, but you know what? They're burning calories. It's all good. Their location doesn't change. MJO, on the other hand, this is another person on a bike, but this bike is moving. This is a 6-year-old child that's misbehaving, not listening to their parents, that are screaming, get off the stage while this person is trying to exercise on their stationary bike. So this is the misfit child that keeps interrupting the show on the stage there.
Like me right now with my notifications.
Right, crossing the stage repeatedly with that darn bicycle, and they won't stop. So that's the difference. Again, ENSO, stationary. It's not constantly changing. MGO, it just comes in and tries to upend literally everything.
Forecasting's fun, right? There's so much to it.
Let me tell you.
That's why only really trust the forecast a couple days out. Everything else, think it can change.
Yes, absolutely.
So forecasting the MJO. So the current phase that we are in a phase 3. So we look at that little graph.
Yep.
You can see there's a section in that bottom right corner. You got the phase 3 right there, which is over the Indian Ocean, I believe, if I'm reading this graph right.
Mm-hmm.
And so our phase 3 brings us cooler air. Makes sense. We are a little bit cooler. And a lot of the United States is cooler. In fact, the entire Midwest is actually cool. So this definitely it verifies. And then phase 3 for rain, a lot of the rain is shifted just to our south and east, which also has verified. I've noticed a lot of our systems are kind of favoring more just to the south, passing us right by and going into southern Illinois, going into Indiana, going off to Ohio. And we haven't really seen all that much. I know a lot of people are saying, I want rain, we need rain. And granted, we did get a good amount. I will say last weekend's weather system was very impressive. It is very impressive to get at least an inch for almost all of our hometowns. So that was some much needed rain, but of course we dried out for much of this week.
Yes, yeah, that was a big system that jumped a lot of rain, which was nice to see. But yeah, you were right. If you look at the phase 3 here, it's nearly spot on, which is cool. And you're thinking, well, what do you mean? I thought you said the MJO is not as reliable and not as accurate. Well, it's all about what phase are you going to be in the future. So obviously it knows what phase we're in right now, but how you read this thing is if you follow the green trend line here, this is the model average. When you take all the model data, this is the average of where you're headed next here. And notice it's plotted by each day. So this is the previous trend. So this is back in April. There's April 26th, 27th, 28th. And then here's the beginning of May. We were in phase 1. We went to phase 2. It looks like we're going to inevitably go back to phase 2 in the next couple of days. And then back into phase 3 before heading into phases 4, 5, and then eventually into 6. All these yellow lines represent each individual model. You can see there's a lot of variability in that. But generally, the trend is speaking here that we're going to eventually go back into phase 2 and then back into phase 3. So that means we're not done with the cooler air yet, which is why we have temperatures in the 60s and close to 70 the next couple of days. And then we go back above average, which is probably what phase 4 is, I'm guessing, as you get a little bit more warmth in here. But it really, again, depends on what phase you're in that's going to determine what happens with this. Each phase has its own map. This is phase 3 map. If we go to phase 4, it's an entirely different map based on past history. So that's the biggest fly in the ointment. What phase is it going to go in? Because it can jump around. We can go from phase 3, go right into phase 4, and continue on. We may not even go back to phase 2. That may not even verify. So that's the biggest kind of fly in the ointment, if you will.
Yes, and the summary now of all of we have a lot. Okay, there is a lot of different teleconnections, and we just touched on to 2. There could probably be an entire major devoted to these things because they do get very complicated. But this is kind of like showing in terms of how fast they are moving, how quick they can change. We have the initial weather conditions. Obviously can change day to day. That's your fast-moving car, your weather, your outlooks of a week, maybe even going beyond to just 2 weeks, like Andrew and James do in the evening. They always show that 2-week outlook in the final forecast. And then we start to get to things that are moving a little bit slower, around 3 to 4 weeks or on a monthly basis. We do get that MJO. Again, it's something that is faster moving than ENSO. SSW, is that the sudden stratospheric warming? Is that what we're talking about?
Yep.
Yeah, that one's the sudden stratospheric warming, the one that we were talking about, how it did bring us the really cold spell in February as well. Again, and some of these things can work together. So that's also something that a lot of meteorologists and people who are forecasting long range look at. And then we get to the slow moving, or that semi, the one that's seasonal, that can be stable for months, even a year, like ENSO. The La Nina El Nino can be very, very stable. And we also get to trends, aka what do we see on average? What are the trends that we are seeing? And then other surface forcings. Again, there's a lot more teleconnections that can influence our patterns here that even I learned about in school, and I can't even think of them off my head right now.
Oh yeah, there's so many of them, and they can really get complex and complicated too. But that breaks it down really nicely, and the different time scales that these things are, and that's why this gets a little bit more complicated. Lastly, here's an example from the Climate Prediction Center. Sometimes we'll show these on air too. We can import these plots into our graphics system. But the Climate Prediction Center, they really rely more specifically on the ENSO than they do the MJO, though that plays a small part in their forecasting here. But this is their prediction for May. So you can see now that we're nearly halfway through the month, just about here. We got another few more days yet, but we're almost there. And this was their prediction that they put out last month. This was made April 30th. So they were predicting an equal chance of above or below average temperatures, below average likely to the north of us, much above average to the south. In terms of precipitation, they were expecting a really good chance at seeing above average precipitation here. And so far, I think this forecast is working out fairly nicely, especially on the precipitation side. We were above average because we had that nice rainfall in late April, and then of course early May here we had the other one. And then, of course, we're going to be seeing a more active pattern coming in next week, the way it looks. Temperature-wise, it's probably going to end out being pretty even when you look at the end of the month, especially if we can get some more warmth to build in the next 2 weeks and end May on a warm note. That average temperature for the entire month, which is likely sitting in the negatives right now, will once again start climbing and probably get a little bit closer to zero. It depends on how much warmth we get. But if that happens, then I would say that their prediction for this month anyway verifies quite nicely.
I would agree. Absolutely.
Yeah, not bad. Good job, CPC.
Good job.
All right, we're going to get to your questions, whether you're on the main page, Morgan's page, or my page. We'll pull them up here, see who we have on the chat today, if we can answer any questions. Again, it can be anything weather-related. It doesn't have to be about today's topic. It can be about other topics, too. Cooper's being such a good boy.
I have my page, and I just have Seth, our number one fan, Seth, checking in from Clear Lake, Iowa.
Yes!
And my dad.
To send him some swag.
I know. And my dad saying hi.
Dad.
That's all that I see on my page.
Cool. Let's see. Okay, there's that one. I have the hardest time getting to my page, and I don't know why. I guess I'm just special. I don't know. There we go. It came up. So we got Linnell saying the weather's going to be good for upcoming graduations. Yes. I know some, sadly, aren't doing the in-person thing. They're doing a virtual thing, which I think is a bummer. Certainly, I know we can be outside with a little bit more caution anyway, so I hope people will utilize that. She says it's a beautiful day in Elizabeth. Farmers use the long range for planting a lot of times. That's very true. They do. Absolutely. Good to see you today, Linnell.
All right, I'm trying to bring up just make sure I can see everyone's.
Wow, there's a lot of comments.
Yes, do you have it up?
Yep, it's just coming up now. It's actually taking a minute to load. Wow. Did we have an overflow room today? I guess goodness.
Oh man.
I see Tina.
Okay.
You see Tina?
I don't see Tina.
Tina says, beautiful today. Asking how we are. She has wasps and they are very aggravating. Somebody knows about that.
I do. I know way too much about that.
She said we had a bad tornado years ago here in Galva. I hope we never have another one. Living in a mobile home is not the greatest place to be during bad weather. Both of you have a great rest of the afternoon. Thank you, Tina.
Thank you. Andrew, are you on the right one?
I think so. Maybe. Oh my gosh, I am on one from 2 weeks ago.
I got that notification too. What is
so
that's why I was asking.
Facebook, what are you doing?
Okay, I have this one up,
Oh
and
my
we
goodness.
have
Take it away.
Cassie, I think, checking in from Erie. Elizabeth checking in from Thomas, Illinois. Jerry saying hello from Monmouth. Hope you are having a great afternoon.
Nice.
Karen saying good news, probably to the fact that temperatures are getting warmer.
Yes.
Brenda saying hi, Morgan and Andrew from Geneseo.
All right.
Mary asking if about frost potential for tonight. I think that potential is very, very low. We're not going to be as cold as we were last night. We'll still be chilly, but I don't think we'll have a good potential for frost.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Marcia saying, hello from Galesburg. Please say I can plant a few garden things safely by the 17th and not have to cover them. I will say by the 17th, I would say that is you should have the green lights because we are seeing warmer temperatures heading that way. And then Cynthia saying hi from East Moline. And then Karen, I think, saying hi to someone that she might recognize in here. Okay.
Awesome.
But yes, Mary, there is your extended forecast. Tonight we get down to 40, but that will be the coolest night that it looks like for the week beyond. And as we get farther into May, the harder it really does to get that cold again. And again, that 2-week outlook looking quite in favor for you to get some plants in the ground. So I think by the 17th, you're going to be okay for that.
Yeah, pending any long-range snafu, yeah, I think we're safe to say that was the last of the frost.
Hopefully.
And someone is now awake.
Oh, Cooper. All right, I think that's it.
Awesome. Well, you guys have been awesome with chiming in with your comments and questions there. We appreciate it. Schedule's going to get a little iffy the next couple of weeks. I know I'm on vacation next week. So I don't know if we'll take a break. Maybe take a week off.
We're taking a break. I will be in for James next Wednesday. So.
That's right. Yes. So we're going to take a break on that. A little summer break, if you will. But we're not going to be gone weeks and weeks upon weeks. But we'll hope to be back the following week. Of course, if we don't see you then, we will see you this weekend coming up on the old newscast. And Morgan will see you next weekend for James. That'll be fun. The evening show, you get to kind of do now and then. I like it.
Yeah. I like doing the evening show sometimes. It's fun. So I'm excited.
Yeah, it's nice to mix it up. You get to see some different people. You get to work with Jim and Denise and Jillian. And Jillian's no stranger because, of course, you did some morning fill-ins and Jillian was in the morning for Angie. But, yeah, now you get to be reunited in the evening, which is exciting.
I know. I'm excited. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, so it'll be fun. So we'll enjoy that. You guys can enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. Cooper is going to enjoy the rest of his water bottle here, which I think he stole off my desk. It probably still has a little bit of water in it. Verified, yes it does, and it's on the floor. So at least it's water. It's just water.
Oh, Cooper.
Yeah, better than pop, I guess. All right, we'll let you guys go. Have a good Wednesday. We'll see you here this upcoming weekend. You guys take